On that July morning, the sky over Denver was gray and humid, the kind of sky that seems to weigh on people's shoulders. Emily Parker observed the heavy clouds through the taxi window as it headed toward Denver International Airport. Raindrops began to dot the glass, forming trails that ran down like silent tears. Just like her life in recent months, the weather seemed to conspire against her plans. The driver, a middle-aged man with a strong rural Colorado accent, tried to make conversation. "You traveling for pleasure, ma'am?" Emily forced a polite smile. "Work. Job interview in Chicago." "Ah, lots of folks heading there lately. They say there are more opportunities." She just nodded, preferring not to prolong the conversation. How could she explain that, at 35, she was playing her last card on an interview that would probably be just another closed door? How could she confess to a stranger that her savings were dwindling, and this trip was only possible thanks to a personal loan? Since the public school where she taught had closed due to budget cuts, Emily had been sending out resumes daily, participating in remote selections, and facing interviews that always ended in silence. The only positive response in months came from a private school network in Chicago, and even then, without guarantees. Just an interview scheduled for that afternoon. The airport was already busy when she arrived. Tired passengers settled into plastic seats, staff dragged suitcases, and the metallic voice of the announcement system called out departures and arrivals with its usual impersonality. Emily paid the taxi, adjusted her wool hat over her brown hair, and gripped the handle of her old wheeled suitcase more tightly, as if that object were her last connection to something secure. She had an hour before boarding. Emily bought a cheap coffee from one of the kiosks and sat near the gate. The hot liquid went down bitter, but at least brought some comfort on that cold morning. While waiting, she observed the people around her. Executives in suits talking on phones, families with excited children, tourists carrying shopping bags. Everyone seemed to have a purpose, a certain destination. Everyone, except her. For a moment, Emily allowed herself to doubt. Maybe she should have accepted the assistant position at a store near her home, as her neighbor Mrs. Wilson had suggested. Maybe she should stop insisting on a future that seemed unwilling to arrive. Education had been her passion, her calling since adolescence, but the system seemed to push her away with each attempt. It was then that something broke the monotonous rhythm of the terminal. A sharp, uneven sound tore through the stuffy air. A child crying. People around turned, some with impatience, others with concern. Emily turned her face too and saw across the hall a man with an exhausted expression and wrinkled clothes trying to console a small girl in his arms. The child, with very pale skin and almost white blonde hair, seemed as fragile as a flower that bends before its time. Her blue eyes were red from crying, and her body trembled slightly. The man, whom Emily presumed to be the father, tried with a firm but gentle voice to talk to the attendant at the counter, while showing documents and pointing to the departure board. "I understand your situation, sir, but all seats are occupied," the attendant explained with visible discomfort. "Without a prior medical reservation, there's nothing I can do." "Please," the man insisted. "My daughter needs to get to Chicago today. The doctor is waiting." The girl coughed, a weak sound that made her father adjust his protective embrace. Emily noticed that the child was wearing a hospital identification bracelet. The man wasn't shouting or making a scene, but the desperation in his posture was clear to anyone who observed carefully. Emily didn't know why, but she felt something strong tighten in her chest. It wasn't exactly empathy. It was closer to a painful compassion, a silent recognition between people who are at their limit, holding on to life with their fingertips. For a moment, her problems seemed to diminish in size. Without thinking too much, she stood up. She left her half-finished coffee on the bench, grabbed her suitcase and walked to the counter. The attendant raised her eyes, surprised by someone else approaching. "Excuse me," said Emily, with a firmness she didn't know she possessed. "I'd like to give up my seat on this flight for this gentleman and his daughter." The attendant blinked, confused. "Ma'am, are you sure? There's no guarantee we can get you on another flight today." Emily looked at the man, who was staring at her with a mixture of surprise and gratitude, and then at the girl who was now breathing with difficulty in her father's arms. "I'm sure," she replied, handing over her ticket. "My interview can wait." The attendant hesitated, but seeing the firmness in Emily's eyes, she accepted. In a few minutes, the documents were updated, and the man received the new boarding pass. He tried to thank her, but the words seemed difficult to find. "I don't know how—" "No need," interrupted Emily, with a genuine smile for the first time that day. "Just make sure she gets the care she needs." The man nodded, his eyes shining with contained tears. The girl, who had stopped crying, observed Emily with childish curiosity. "What's your name?" Emily asked the little one. "Lily," the child replied in a thread of a voice, "but everyone calls me Lily." "It's a beautiful name, Lily. Everything will be all right," said Emily, lightly touching the girl's arm. Then she walked away without looking back, as the boarding announcement began to sound. Emily sat down again, alone, on the cold terminal bench while the boarding took place. When she saw the father disappear with his daughter in his arms through the gate, she felt a strange emptiness, as if she had let go of something much bigger than a simple trip. In the line at the ticket rebooking counter, Emily tried to mentally calculate how long it would take to get to Chicago by bus. She probably wouldn't arrive in time for the interview. Her cell phone vibrated in her coat pocket. It was a message from the coordinator of the school in Chicago, confirming our interview at 5 p.m. "We look forward to your punctual attendance." Emily took a deep breath. Should she explain the situation? Ask to reschedule? Before she could decide, the attendant called her. "I'm sorry, Ms. Parker. We don't have any more flights available to Chicago today. I can reschedule for tomorrow morning, but there would be an additional rebooking fee." Emily did the math. The fee would cost almost half of what remained in her bank account, and she would still need a place to sleep in Chicago. "I'll think about other options," she replied, moving away from the counter. Outside the airport, the rain had increased. Emily adjusted her hat and walked to the bus stop. The trip back home was silent. The bus bounced along the wet streets of the city, and Emily, leaning against the foggy window, tried to make sense of her decision. Maybe she had been too impulsive. Maybe she should have thought it through better. But whenever doubt arose, the image of Lily, pale and fragile, returned to her mind. Her small apartment in the Highland neighborhood welcomed her with its usual silence. The peeling walls, the simple furniture. Everything seemed even sadder on that rainy afternoon. Emily left her suitcase by the door and went straight to the couch. She didn't have the energy to unpack it. After all, there was nothing to unpack. There was no interview, no opportunity, no fresh start. She took out her phone and wrote a polite message to the coordinator of the school in Chicago, explaining that, due to a family emergency, she couldn't attend the interview. She didn't mention the real reason. Who would believe it? Who would understand that she had given up a job opportunity for someone she didn't even know? That night, as the rain continued to fall over Denver, Emily fell asleep on the couch, dressed and exhausted. Her last thought was for Lily and her father. She hoped they had arrived safely in Chicago. She hoped the girl was receiving the treatment she needed. And in a secret corner of her mind, she hoped that impulsive gesture hadn't been just another wrong decision in her life full of uncertainties. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. The days that followed seemed to drag with the same slowness as the rain that persisted in falling over Denver. Emily spent hours sitting by the window of her small apartment, watching the drops run down the glass while mentally recalculating her meager savings. The rent would be due in 2 weeks, and the balance in her bank account would barely cover the essential expenses of the month. The coordinator of the school in Chicago had responded to her message with a laconic, "We understand. We will contact you if another opportunity arises." Emily knew how to recognize a polite rejection when she read one. There would be no second chance there. On that Wednesday morning, exactly 3 days after the episode at the airport, Emily finally decided to resume her job search routine. She opened her worn laptop on the kitchen table and began browsing job sites. The same vacancies from the previous week were still there, with their impossible requirements and mediocre salaries. She sent 5 resumes before discouragement made her close the computer. Her cell phone rang, startling her. It was Jessica, her best friend since their days in education college. "Hi, Jess," Emily answered, forcing a cheerful tone. "Emily, finally. I've been trying to reach you since yesterday. How was the interview in Chicago?" Emily hesitated. She hadn't told anyone about her decision at the airport, not even Jessica, the one person who would really understand. Or maybe not even she would. I didn't go, she replied, deciding to be honest. What do you mean you didn't go? Emily, you were so excited about this opportunity. Something unexpected happened at the airport, she explained, briefly recounting the encounter with Lily and her father. As she narrated, she realized how strange the story sounded, almost made up. On the other end of the line, Jessica remained silent for a few seconds. You gave up your ticket for a stranger, she finally asked, her voice oscillating between disbelief and admiration. Emily, I don't even know what to say. It was an impulse, admitted Emily. When I saw that sick child, I couldn't just turn my back. And now? What are you going to do? What I always do. Keep trying. After hanging up, Emily decided she needed to get out. The small apartment seemed to suffocate her. She put on a light jacket, grabbed her purse, and went down the stairs of the old building. The Highland neighborhood, with its steep streets and historic houses, always brought her some comfort, even on the toughest days. She walked without a specific destination, observing people in their seemingly ordered routines. Families strolling, hurried workers, students chatting animatedly at bus stops. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going, except her. She passed by the public school, where she had taught for 6 years. The grey building, now with windows closed by wooden boards, was a melancholy reminder of how quickly things could change. There, Emily had built reading projects for children from underprivileged communities, had put on theatrical plays with students considered difficult, had transformed the small library into a space of discovery. All of this now reduced to memories and a certificate of pedagogical excellence stored in a drawer. On her way back home, she stopped at a bakery to buy bread. While waiting in line, she overheard a conversation between 2 men having coffee at the counter. Did you see that video that's going around, of the woman at the airport? Which one? There's so much stuff circulating these days. The one of the teacher who gave up her plane seat for a father with a sick child. They say she missed an important job interview because of it. Emily felt her stomach sink. What were they talking about? How could anyone know about this? Oh yeah, I saw that. Amazing how people like that still exist, right? In times of such rush, of every man for himself. Emily paid for the bread quickly and left the bakery with her heart racing. On the way home, she checked her phone, browsing through social media she rarely used. She didn't find anything in her first searches, but when she typed Denver airport gesture, several results appeared. The first was a short video, apparently recorded by an airport security camera. The quality wasn't the best, but Emily recognized herself from behind, talking to the attendant at the counter, handing over her ticket, and then walking away as the man adjusted his daughter in his arms. The caption read, "In difficult times, gestures that renew our faith in humanity. Unemployed teacher gives up her seat on flight for father with sick child." Below, hundreds of comments praised the gesture, some questioning its authenticity, others asking who the woman in the video was. Emily sat on a park bench, stunned. How had that leaked? Who had shared it? And why did they mention she was an unemployed teacher? Her phone rang again. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. "Ms. Emily Parker?" asked a female voice on the other end. "Yes, that's me. This is the Denver Public Schools Department. We'd like to schedule an interview with you for tomorrow at 10 a.m. We have a substitute teaching position at Lincoln Memorial Elementary. Would you be available?" Emily was speechless for a moment. She had sent her resume to the department months ago with no response. "Yes, of course. I'll be there," she replied, still confused. "Great. We ask that you bring all your documents and certifications. See you tomorrow." The call ended before Emily could ask any questions. An interview that came out of nowhere just when her gesture at the airport was starting to circulate. It seemed too much of a coincidence. When she got home, she found something unexpected at her apartment door. A small craft paper box carefully tied with twine. She looked around, but the hallway was empty. She took the box inside and opened it carefully. Inside was a small bouquet of wildflowers and an unsigned card that said, "Silent kindnesses build futures." Emily sat on the couch, holding the card with trembling fingers. Who could have left that? Was it a neighbor who saw the video? Or maybe, could it be possible that Lily's father had discovered her address? She put the flowers in a glass with water. She didn't have a vase, and kept the card in her bedside table drawer. Despite the strangeness of the situation, There was something comforting in that anonymous gesture. Someone, somewhere, had noticed her existence, had valued her action. The next morning, Emily woke up early, more willing than she had been in weeks. She chose her best clothes, a navy blue skirt, a white blouse, and a simple blazer she kept for special occasions, and reviewed her portfolio of pedagogical projects. The interview at the public schools department was an opportunity she couldn't waste, even if it was just for a temporary position. The department building was in the city center, an old edifice with labyrinthine corridors. Emily arrived 20 minutes before the scheduled time and waited in a room with 5 other people, probably candidates for the same position. They all seemed younger, perhaps recent graduates, with new folders and anxious expressions. Emily felt a tightness in her chest. What were her real chances? When her name was called, she followed the secretary down a long corridor to a room at the end. Upon entering, she realized that this was not an ordinary interview. Besides the traditional desk, there was a small team with cameras set up in a corner. A middle-aged woman with grey hair tied in a severe bun stood up to greet her. "Miss Parker, I'm Karen Williams, Education Secretary. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Emily shook the extended hand, confused by the formality and especially by the cameras. "The pleasure is mine," she replied automatically. "But if I may ask, what does all this apparatus mean?" Karen smiled, indicating a chair for Emily to sit down. "I imagine you're surprised. The truth is that we didn't call you just for a common interview. We're implementing a new project in the public school system, focused on humanized education, and we'd like you to be the face of it." Emily blinked, trying to process the information. "Face? I don't understand." "The video of you at the airport, giving up your seat for that family, has reached over 1 million views in the last 48 hours. People are moved, inspired, and when we discovered that you were one of our former teachers, we saw a unique opportunity there." Emily felt her face heat up. 1 million views. Unknown people watching a moment she considered private. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "I didn't do that for recognition. I didn't even know I was being filmed." "That's exactly why your gesture is so powerful, Miss Parker. It was genuine, spontaneous. It's the kind of empathy we want to instill in our schools. So in addition to offering the substitute teaching position, we'd like to invite you to be the spokesperson for our new campaign, Education Beyond Classrooms." Emily looked at the cameras, then at the secretary. The proposal was tempting. A guaranteed job, visibility, maybe even a better salary. But something in all of this deeply bothered her. The instrumentalization of a gesture that had been pure, without ulterior motives. "May I think about it?" she finally asked. "I'm interested in the teaching position, of course, but as for being a spokesperson, I need to reflect a bit more." Karen seemed disappointed but nodded. "I understand. We can give you until tomorrow to decide. In the meantime, let's proceed with the interview for the teaching position." The interview followed traditional lines, with questions about methodology, experience, and projects developed. Emily answered with the confidence of someone who knew her craft well, but part of her mind was still stuck on the previous proposal. Being the face of a campaign would mean exposure. It would mean transforming her gesture into a kind of product. When she left the department 2 hours later, Emily had a formal offer for the substitute teaching position at Lincoln Memorial Elementary, starting the following week. She should be happy, relieved. It was what she had been waiting for, wasn't it? A job in her field in the city she knew, close to her apartment. So why did she feel that persistent discomfort? Why, instead of celebrating, was she walking slowly through the streets of downtown, observing people as if seeking some answer in the expressions of strangers? Perhaps because, deep down, she knew that accepting that proposal, especially the campaign part, would somehow betray the spirit of her gesture at the airport, turn into a spectacle, something that had been merely human. While waiting for the bus at the busy stop, Emily spotted an abandoned newspaper on the bench. The secondary headline, in the lower corner of the front page, caught her attention. "Airport gesture becomes symbol of hope." There was a small grainy photo, captured from a different angle than the video she had seen. In this one, Emily's face could be clearly seen, as well as that of little Lily, smiling shyly at her. Emily picked up the newspaper with trembling hands. She read the article quickly, her heart accelerating with each line. The text mentioned that the child's father was Michael Thompson, an entrepreneur in the educational sector and founder of a network of inclusive schools. The girl suffered from a rare neurological condition and needed specialized treatment in Chicago. The name now had a face, a story. Michael Thompson, Emily repeated mentally as she folded the newspaper and put it in her bag. There was something about this story that was still incomplete, something she needed to understand better. The bus arrived, noisy and crowded as always. Emily got on, holding onto the railing as the vehicle set off through the steep streets of the Colorado capital. Through the window, she observed the sky that was finally beginning to clear after days of persistent rain. Perhaps, she thought, as the bus continued on its way, perhaps the sun was finally returning to her life as well. But in a way she could never have imagined. After a restless night, full of confused dreams where airports transformed into classrooms and pale children smiled between empty desks, Emily woke up with the certainty that she needed to make a decision. The contract for the substitute teaching position was on her table, next to Secretary Karen Williams' card, who was waiting for an answer about the Education Beyond Classrooms campaign proposal. Emily prepared a strong coffee and sat by the window, observing the city that was beginning to wake up. Denver had that effect on her. Even in moments of greatest uncertainty, the view of the distant mountains brought some clarity. She took the newspaper she had saved the day before and reread the article about Michael Thompson and his daughter Lily. The text mentioned that Michael had been a widower for 3 years, since his wife, Sarah, had passed away after a sudden illness. Since then, he had dedicated himself to expanding his network of inclusive schools, New Pathways, which served children with different special needs. Lily, his only daughter, had been diagnosed with a rare neurological condition at the age of 4, just when her mother fell ill. There was something about this story that deeply touched Emily. Perhaps the resilience of that man who had transformed his pain into a life project. Perhaps the unexpected connection between their trajectories, both dedicated to education, both facing significant losses, albeit of different natures. Her cell phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Karen Williams. "Good morning, Ms. Parker. Forgive me for calling so early, but we need your answer about the campaign. We have a press conference scheduled for tomorrow and would like to announce you as our spokesperson." Emily took a deep breath before answering. "Good morning, Ms. Williams. I appreciate the opportunity, but I must decline the campaign. I gratefully accept the substitute teaching position, but I prefer to maintain my privacy regarding what happened at the airport." There was silence on the other end of the line. When Karen spoke again, her voice had a different tone, colder. "I understand your decision, Ms. Parker, although I confess I'm disappointed. As for the teaching position, I'm afraid we'll need to reevaluate it. I'll be in touch later." The call ended before Emily could respond. A knot formed in her throat. It was clear that the two proposals were conditional. Either she accepted both, or she would lose the opportunity completely. The pain of rejection was familiar, but no less intense. Emily spent the morning organizing her small apartment, an attempt to also order her thoughts. Around noon, she decided she couldn't keep dwelling on that situation. She got dressed and went out for a walk in City Park, one of her favorite places in the city. The park was relatively empty for a weekday. Emily walked slowly along the shaded paths, observing the ducks in the lake, the families enjoying the timid sun that was finally appearing after days of rain. She sat on a bench near the playground and watched some children playing under the watchful supervision of their nannies. One of them, a girl of approximately 6 years, seemed to have some motor difficulty. She moved with a certain rigidity, but her face expressed pure joy as she tried to climb the slide. The nanny, a patient lady, helped her without making a fuss, giving her the necessary assistance without compromising her autonomy. The scene brought a smile to Emily's lips. This was what moved her as an educator, the belief in the potential of each child, regardless of their limitations. That's why she refused the campaign proposal. She didn't want to be an empty symbol, a face on motivational posters. She wanted to make a real difference in direct contact with her students. "It's inspiring, isn't it?" The male voice beside her startled her. Emily turned and her heart almost stopped. Sitting on the same bench, a few meters away, was the man from the airport, Michael Thompson. He smiled, a gentle smile that formed small wrinkles at the corners of his brown eyes. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a light blue shirt, a light jacket, quite different from the desperate and exhausted man Emily had met days ago. "Mr. Thompson," she murmured, unable to hide her surprise. What are you doing here?" "Please, just Michael," he replied, his smile widening. "And as for what I'm doing here, well, this might seem a little strange. I looked for you." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. "Looked for me? How? Why?" Michael leaned slightly forward, resting his elbows on his knees. There was a seriousness in his gaze now. "Through the airport video, it wasn't hard to discover your full name. It was on the ticket you gave up. Then, with some contacts, I found out you were a teacher. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did for Lily and me." Emily looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. "It wasn't anything special. Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true," Michael replied kindly. "In today's world, gestures like yours are rare, and for us, it made all the difference. Lily managed to arrive in time for the experimental treatment we had been waiting for months." Emily felt a wave of relief. "How is she?" "Better. The treatment seems to be working. The doctors are optimistic." Michael paused, observing the girl on the playground, who was now coming down the slide amidst laughter. "You know, my daughter has a similar condition, Rett syndrome. It's degenerative, but with the right treatments we can delay the progression." Emily nodded, remembering Lily's fragility in her father's arms. "Was it you who left the flowers?" she asked suddenly. Michael laughed. "Guilty. I hope I didn't scare you. I thought it would be a discreet way to thank you before introducing myself formally." The card, "Silent kindnesses build futures." "It's a motto I adopted after my wife's passing," he explained, a tone of melancholy softening his voice. "Sarah was a teacher, like you. She believed that small acts of kindness could change entire trajectories." Emily felt a strange connection with this woman she had never met. She seems to have been someone special. "She was," confirmed Michael, "and it was because of her that I created the New Pathways School Network, to honor her legacy, her belief in inclusive education." For a few minutes they sat in silence, watching the children play. It was a comfortable silence, as if they were old friends reunited after a long absence. "I heard that the public schools department offered you a position," Michael commented finally. Emily turned to him surprised. "How do you know that?" He shrugged. "I have some contacts. The educational sector in Denver isn't as big as it seems." "They did offer, but there were conditions I couldn't accept." Michael nodded, understanding. "The publicity campaign, using your gesture as institutional marketing." "Exactly," confirmed Emily, impressed with his knowledge of her situation. "I didn't feel comfortable with that. And now, what are your plans?" Emily sighed, looking back at the lake. "Keep looking. Something will come up eventually." Michael remained silent for a few moments, as if pondering something important. When he spoke again, his voice had a cautious tone. "Emily, I'd like to make you an invitation, not as repayment for what you did for us, that would be impossible to quantify, but as a genuine professional opportunity." Emily felt her heart accelerate. "What kind of invitation?" "We're expanding the New Pathways unit here in Denver. We need experienced educators with sensitivity to deal with special children. Your resume is impressive. 6 years as a teacher in the public system, specialization in educational psychology, innovative inclusion projects. Would you like to visit our school? No commitment, just to see if it would be something that might interest you." Emily blinked, stunned by the unexpected proposal. "I don't know what to say. How do you know so much about my resume?" Michael smiled, slightly embarrassed. "I confess I did my research. After I learned your name, I wanted to understand who was the person behind that gesture. What I found impressed me even more. For a moment, Emily felt vulnerable, exposed. It was strange to know that this man, practically a stranger, had investigated her professional life, but at the same time there was something genuinely respectful in his approach. "You don't need to answer now," added Michael, noticing her hesitation. "Think about it. Here's my card. When you feel comfortable, call me and we'll arrange a visit to the school." Emily accepted the card, observing the New Pathways logo, a stylized tree with diverse children under its shade. It was a beautiful concept, one that aligned with her own educational philosophy. "Thank you," she finally said. "I'll think about it carefully." Michael stood up, adjusting his jacket. "I'm glad we met again, Emily. I believe it wasn't a coincidence." Before she could respond, a childish voice sounded a few meters away. "Daddy, look what I found." Lily was walking slowly across the grass, holding something in her hands. Her almost white blonde hair reflected the sunlight, and her face, once pale and contorted with pain, now displayed a luminous smile. She wore a yellow dress and colorful rubber boots. She looked like a completely different child from the one Emily had seen at the airport. "Lily," called Michael, extending his hand to his daughter. "Come meet someone special." The girl approached, curious. When she got close enough to recognize Emily, her blue eyes widened. "It's the lady from the plane," she exclaimed, with a mixture of surprise and joy. Emily smiled, touched by the recognition. "Hello, Lily, it's good to see you again. You look much better." The child nodded vigorously. "The doctor in Chicago gave me a new medicine. He said I'll be able to go back to school soon." "That's wonderful," replied Emily, genuinely happy. Lily extended her hand, opening it to reveal a small, shiny stone she had found. "Look, it's for you, as a gift." Emily accepted the offering with the seriousness that the moment required. "It's beautiful, Lily. I'll keep it with great care." The girl smiled, satisfied, and then pulled her father's hand. "Can we get ice cream now?" "You promised." Michael laughed, exchanging a complicit look with Emily. "Yes, we can. Would Miss Parker like to join us?" Emily hesitated for just a second. "I'd love to." As they walked together toward the park's ice cream shop, Emily felt a strange sense of belonging, as if that casual encounter had been somehow predestined. The stone that Lily had given her weighed in her pocket, a small symbol of an unexpected connection that could, perhaps, change the course of her life. That afternoon, between chocolate ice creams and pleasant conversations about schools, books, and dreams, Emily began to glimpse a new path. A path she hadn't planned, but which seemed strangely right. When she said goodbye to Michael and Lily late in the afternoon, with the promise to visit the school the following week, Emily returned home with light steps. The uncertainty that had accompanied her in recent months seemed to have dissipated, at least temporarily. In her apartment, she placed Lily's stone on her bedside table next to Michael's card. Two small objects that somehow seemed to symbolize a new direction. That night, for the first time in a long time, Emily slept without anxiety, without fear of the future. Her last reflections before falling asleep were about coincidences, destiny, and how small gestures can trigger profound transformations. Perhaps, she thought, as sleep gently enveloped her, perhaps that impulsive decision at the airport hadn't been a mistake after all. The week passed quickly, and on Monday morning, Emily found herself in front of the large green gate of the New Pathways Institute. The building, a carefully restored old mansion in the Washington Park neighborhood, exuded a welcoming charm. Large windows let natural light flood the environment, and the front garden, filled with colorful flowers and adapted toys, indicated that this was not a common educational space. Emily adjusted the blazer she had bought especially for that visit, a small extravagance that her bank account would not approve of, but which gave her the confidence necessary for that moment. She took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A young woman with a warm smile received her. "Good morning. You must be Emily Parker. I'm Rebecca, Michael's assistant. He asked me to welcome you and show you our facilities. He's finalizing a meeting and will join us shortly." Emily followed Rebecca through the corridors of the institute. Unlike the public schools where she had worked, with their grey walls and standardized furniture, each space here seemed to have been designed to stimulate the senses and imagination. The classrooms had themes: ocean, forest, space, with immersive decorations and specially developed pedagogical materials. The desks were arranged in semicircles or small groups, never in rigid rows. "We serve children from 3 to 14 years old," Rebecca explained as they walked. "Some attend New Pathways full-time, others come only for complementary activities. Each child has an individualized pedagogical plan developed by our multidisciplinary team." In one of the rooms, a group of 6 children was participating in a musical activity. One of them, in a wheelchair, played a drum adapted to her motor possibilities, while another, with evident characteristics of the autism spectrum, sang with surprising tunefulness. Our philosophy is to value potentialities, not emphasize limitations, continued Rebecca. We believe that every child has a unique talent to be discovered and nurtured. Emily felt increasingly enchanted. That environment was the materialization of everything she had always defended as an educator, a space where differences were celebrated, not just tolerated. They arrived at a spacious room, with low shelves full of books and colorful cushions scattered across the floor. Children of different ages were sitting in small groups, some leafing through books, others listening to stories told by an educator. "This is our literature space," explained Rebecca. "We believe that stories are powerful tools for developing empathy and understanding of the world." Emily couldn't help but notice how some children, even with evident communication difficulties, seemed completely absorbed in the narratives. A small girl who rhythmically rocked her body, a typical behavior of some autism spectrum profiles, interrupted her rocking with each page turn, totally connected to the story. "It's amazing," murmured Emily. "What, exactly?" asked a male voice behind her. Emily turned and found Michael, who was approaching with a welcoming smile. He wore dark pants and a light blue shirt, no tie, a professional but relaxed look. "Everything," she replied sincerely. "The way the children are engaged, how the environment was designed to meet different needs." Michael nodded, satisfied with the observation. It was Sarah who developed most of this model. She believed that the physical environment is a third educator, as important as family and teachers. "She seems to have been an extraordinary educator," commented Emily. A shadow of melancholy briefly passed through Michael's eyes, but was quickly replaced by a gleam of determination. "She was, and her legacy continues to live in this space and in the hundreds of children who have passed through here." Rebecca discreetly stepped away, leaving the two alone. Michael invited Emily to continue the tour. "Would you like to see our sensory room? It's one of the most special spaces in the Institute." The sensory room was a magical environment. Soft lights slowly changed color, projecting patterns on the walls. Bubble columns, fabrics with different textures, adapted musical instruments and other sensory resources were available in a space carefully organized to avoid sensory overload. Here, children with sensory hypersensitivity can regulate themselves, while those with hyposensitivity find the stimulation they need, explained Michael. "We work a lot with sensory integration, the idea that the organization of sensations is fundamental for learning." Emily approached a bubble column that slowly changed color. The effect was almost hypnotic. "It's fascinating," she commented. "At the public school where I worked, I tried to create a small sensory corner in my classroom, but with extremely limited resources. Some parents even donated materials, but we never achieved anything remotely like this." Michael observed Emily with growing interest. "Tell me more about your previous projects." As they walked through the other spaces of the Institute, Emily shared her experiences. She talked about the reading club she created for children with learning difficulties, about the curricular adaptations she developed on her own, about the nights she stayed awake researching alternative methods to reach students whom the traditional system had labeled as difficult. "You did all that without institutional support?" asked Michael, clearly impressed. Emily shrugged. "I did what I could with what I had, but I always dreamed of working in a place where inclusion was a priority, not just a poorly fulfilled legal obligation." They arrived at a small cafeteria in the back garden where some tables were arranged under leafy trees. Michael invited Emily to sit down. "Coffee? Tea? Coffee, please, black." While they waited for the drinks, Michael seemed to carefully ponder his next words. Finally, he leaned slightly forward. "Emily, I didn't invite you here just to get to know the Institute. I have a concrete proposal for you." Emily's heart accelerated. "I'm listening." "We're expanding our team. Besides this unit in Washington Park, we're opening a new branch in the Cherry Creek neighborhood. We need a pedagogical coordinator to lead the educational project there." Emily almost choked on her own air. "Pedagogical coordinator? But I've never held a management position before." "Management can be learned," Michael replied calmly. "What can't be taught is passion, commitment, and the ability to see beyond limitations. And that, Emily, you demonstrated not only at the airport, but throughout your professional journey." The drinks arrived, giving Emily a few seconds to organize her thoughts. The proposal was surprising, far beyond what she had imagined. "I don't know if I'm prepared for such a big responsibility." she finally admitted. Michael smiled. No one is really prepared for great challenges. The question is, are you willing to grow with them? Emily took a sip of coffee, buying time. May I ask why me? There must be more experienced educators with more impressive resumes. Resume isn't everything, Michael replied. What I saw in you, first at the airport and then researching your trajectory, was an educator who doesn't give up, who finds paths where others see only obstacles. That's exactly the profile we need to open a new unit. Emily was silent, absorbing the impact of those words. It was hard not to feel flattered, but there was also an enormous weight in that offer. What if I fail? She asked, verbalizing her biggest fear. Michael gave an understanding smile. Everyone fails at some point. The important thing is how we respond to failure. And Emily, you won't be alone. You'll have the full support of the central team, including mine. Emily looked around at the well-tended garden, at the children playing under the watchful supervision of dedicated educators. It was a dream environment for any teacher committed to inclusive education. What would be the next step if I accept? She asked, still cautious. You would spend a few weeks here getting to know our methodology, our team, and our children. In parallel, you would participate in the selection of educators for the new unit and the development of the specific pedagogical project. And regarding compensation? Emily hesitated, feeling uncomfortable with the question, but knowing it was necessary. Michael mentioned an amount that made Emily hold her breath for a moment. It was significantly higher than she had ever received in the public system. Besides that, he continued, we offer health insurance, meal vouchers, and the possibility of subsidized housing near the new unit if you're interested. The offer was almost too perfect to be true. A small voice of caution sounded in Emily's mind. Michael, I need to ask, does all this have any relation to what happened at the airport? Because if it's just gratitude... Michael gently interrupted her. I won't deny that your gesture touched me deeply and made me notice you. But this proposal is based on your qualifications and what I believe you can bring to New Pathways. I don't hire out of gratitude, Emily. That would be a disservice to our children and their families. Emily nodded, feeling more at ease with the direct explanation. Can I think about it for a few days? Of course, Michael replied. Take the time you need, but I'd like to introduce you to someone else before you go. As if it had been arranged, Lily appeared in the garden, accompanied by an educator. Seeing Emily, her face lit up with a radiant smile. She ran, with that slightly unstable run characteristic of her condition, to the table where they were sitting. Emily, you came, she exclaimed, throwing herself into the teacher's arms without any hesitation. Emily returned the hug, surprised by the spontaneity of the gesture, and by the fact that the girl remembered her name. Hi, Lily. It's so good to see you again. Did you see my classroom? It's the one with the ocean theme. I have a giant plush octopus there. Not yet, but I'd love to see it, replied Emily, charmed by the child's enthusiasm. Lily pulled her by the hand. Come, I'll show you. Daddy said you might come to work here. Is that true? Emily exchanged a look with Michael, who was observing the scene with a serene smile. We're talking about it, she replied diplomatically. Please, say yes, begged Lily, with the sincerity that only children possess. You would be the best teacher here. Emily's heart melted with that spontaneous request. How could she deny something to a child who radiated so much hope? I'll think about it very carefully, Lily, I promise. The visit to the ocean room, with its impressive mural of marine creatures painted from floor to ceiling, completed Emily's enchantment. Lily proudly showed her works displayed on the walls, told about the projects she participated in, introduced her colleagues with a surprising poise for a child with her limitations. When it was finally time to leave, Emily felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. Michael accompanied her to the gate. So, what did you think? He asked. It's incredible, Emily replied sincerely. A dream of any educator who believes in true inclusion. Think about the proposal, said Michael, and know that it's not just a job I'm offering. It's the chance to be part of something bigger, to transform lives. Emily nodded, feeling the weight of those words. I'll call in a few days with my answer. On the bus ride home, Emily tried to organize the whirlwind of emotions and thoughts. The opportunity was extraordinary, far beyond what she had ever dreamed, but it also brought an enormous responsibility. Was she really up to it? That night, sitting in her small living room, Emily did something she hadn't done in a long time. She took paper and pen and began to write. She listed the pros and cons, her strengths and weaknesses, her fears and aspirations. In the end, a crystalline conclusion emerged. Sometimes life offers opportunities that frighten us precisely because they challenge us to grow beyond our comfort zone. And perhaps, thought Emily, as she carefully stored those notes, perhaps the real failure would be to refuse this invitation to growth out of fear of not being enough. 3 days later, after long conversations with Jessica and restless nights pondering all angles, Emily called Michael. Her voice was firm when she said, "I accept the proposal. I want to be part of New Pathways." On the other end of the line, Michael couldn't hide the satisfaction in his voice. "Welcome to the team, Emily. A new journey begins for all of us." Emily hung up the phone with a feeling of lightness she hadn't experienced in months. She looked at the small apartment that had been her refuge during difficult times and smiled. In 2 weeks, she would be moving closer to the new unit, starting not just a new job, but a new chapter in her life. The stone that Lily had given her still rested on her bedside table, a small symbol of how seemingly insignificant gestures could trigger profound transformations. Emily picked it up, feeling its rough texture between her fingers, and carefully stored it in her box of personal treasures. New paths opened before her, and for the first time in a long time, Emily wasn't afraid of the future. She was ready to embrace it, with all its challenges and possibilities. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. The 3 months that followed passed like a whirlwind in Emily's life. Adapting to the new routine, intensive training at the main unit of New Pathways, planning meetings for the inauguration of the branch, everything happened simultaneously at a dizzying pace that barely gave her time to breathe, let alone doubt her decision. The small 2-bedroom apartment in the Cherry Creek neighborhood, subsidized by the Institute, was very different from her old home in Highland. More spacious, brighter, closer to everything. Emily was still surprised when she opened the curtains in the morning and faced the view of the distant mountains. It was as if her life had made a quantum leap towards something she had never imagined for herself. On that Friday morning, Emily woke up even before the alarm clock rang. It was a special day, the first meeting with the parents of the children enrolled in the new unit, which would be inaugurated in exactly 2 weeks. As pedagogical coordinator, it was up to her to present the educational philosophy of the Institute and answer the inevitable questions and anxieties of the families. She carefully chose her clothes, a navy blue dress, discreet but elegant, complemented by a pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother. She wanted to convey confidence and professionalism, even if inside she felt the butterflies characteristic of great challenges. Upon arriving at the new unit, still in the final preparation phase, Emily was greeted by Rebecca, the administrative assistant who had been transferred from the main unit to help her. "Good morning, Emily. We already have confirmation of 28 families for today's meeting. Michael called to say he's going to be a little late, but he asked us to start without him." Emily nodded, feeling a twinge of nervousness. She had counted on Michael's presence for the opening of the meeting. "All right. Is the presentation material ready? And the coffee break?" "Everything organized," Rebecca assured with efficiency. "The team of educators is also arriving. Amber brought the portfolios for exhibition, as you suggested." Emily smiled, grateful for the competence of the team she had helped select in recent weeks. There were 10 educators in total, all with specific training in inclusive education and proven experience with children with different needs. A young team, enthusiastic and, above all, committed to the philosophy of New Pathways. The families began to arrive punctually at 9 a.m. Emily received them at the entrance, introducing herself and leading them to the auditorium specially prepared for the event. She carefully observed each child, each interaction, each look. Some children presented evident characteristics of their conditions, the rigid posture of the autism spectrum, the traits of Down syndrome, motor limitations of different origins. Others, however, had less visible conditions, attention deficits, dyslexias, high abilities. All without exception would be welcomed and respected in their particularities. At 9:30, with the auditorium almost full, Emily went up to the small stage. Her heart was beating hard, but her voice came out firm when she began. "Good morning, everyone. It is with immense joy that we welcome you today to the New Pathways Institute Cherry Creek unit. My name is Emily Parker. I am the pedagogical coordinator of this unit, and together with our extraordinary team, I will be accompanying the educational journey of your children in the coming years." Emily paused, looking directly at the faces in front of her, some anxious, others hopeful, all attentive. "I know that many of you have already traveled a long road to get here. Closed doors, looks of incomprehension, frightening diagnoses, schools that promised inclusion but practiced only superficial tolerance." Several parents nodded, recognizing their own experiences in Emily's words. What we offer here is not just an adapted school. It is a space conceived from its beginning to celebrate neurodiversity, to transform differences into potentialities, to build meaningful learning from the unique characteristics of each child. The presentation continued with Emily explaining the Institute's methodology, the adapted curriculum, the complementary activities, the physical structure planned for different needs. She showed photos of the main unit, videos of children in full development, emotional testimonials from families who had seen their children flourish in the welcoming environment of New Pathways. When she opened for questions, she felt confident and prepared. The doubts were predictable: how the initial adaptation would be, how communication with families would work, what specific training the educators had for each condition served. It was then that a woman stood up at the back of the auditorium, tall, elegant, with perfectly arranged hair and an evident expression of distrust. "Excuse me," she said, in a loud and clear voice. "My name is Catherine Mitchell. My son Nathan has ADHD and severe dyslexia. I've been through 3 schools that promised wonders and delivered only frustration. How can I trust that here will be different?" Emily took a deep breath before answering. "It's a legitimate question, Mrs. Mitchell. Trust is built over time and with concrete results. What I can guarantee today is our unwavering commitment to Nathan's development, our availability to work in close partnership with the family, and a proven methodology that has already transformed the lives of hundreds of children with a profile similar to your son's." Catherine crossed her arms, not seeming convinced. "And what about your personal experience, Ms. Parker? From what I researched, this is your first position as a pedagogical coordinator. After years as a teacher in the public system, what qualifies you to lead such an ambitious project?" An uncomfortable silence took over the auditorium. The question, although pertinent, had been formulated almost as a personal attack. Emily felt her face heat up, but maintained her composure. "My experience in the public system, Mrs. Mitchell, provided me with something that no specialization course could offer: the daily experience of the challenges of inclusion in a system that is not prepared for it. I developed projects with minimal resources, adapted methodologies on my own, sought constant training to serve students that the traditional system had given up on." Emily paused, maintaining a firm gaze. "As for my position here, I was selected after a rigorous evaluation process, and I work in close collaboration with the central team of the Institute, which has decades of accumulated experience. My function is not to impose personal views, but to implement and adapt a consolidated methodology to the specific needs of our children." A murmur of approval ran through the auditorium. Catherine remained standing, as if pondering the answer. It was at this moment that the back door opened, and Michael entered discreetly. He immediately perceived the tension in the environment and accelerated his steps toward the stage. "I apologize for the delay," he said, climbing up beside Emily. "Unpredictable traffic on a rainy day." He turned to the audience with his characteristic smile, the one that conveyed natural security and charisma. "I see you're already getting to know our extraordinary coordinator. Believe me, in 15 years of New Pathways, few professionals have impressed me as much as Emily Parker." Michael paused, his gaze meeting Catherine's, who still remained standing. "Mrs. Mitchell, isn't it? I understand your concerns. When Lily, my daughter, was diagnosed with Rett syndrome, I also found myself questioning, doubting, testing every professional who crossed our path. It's our role as parents." The mention of his daughter and her condition seemed to soften Catherine's expression. Michael continued, "What I can say about Emily is that she is not here by chance. Her professional trajectory, Her commitment to inclusive education and, mainly, her ability to see beyond diagnostic labels were decisive for her choice. But I don't expect you to trust just my words. I invite you, and everyone present here, to closely follow our work in the coming months, to actively participate, to question whenever necessary. Catherine finally nodded and sat back down. Emily gave Michael a look of gratitude, who took over the conduction of the meeting with his usual resourcefulness. He spoke about the Institute's history, about his vision for the future, about expansion plans. When the formal meeting ended, he invited everyone for a coffee break in the gardens, where they could talk informally with the team and get to know the facilities better. Emily observed from a discreet corner the interactions between families and educators. She felt simultaneously exhausted and fulfilled. Catherine's questioning, although uncomfortable, had been an opportunity to reaffirm her own conviction that she was in the right place, doing what she should do. "You were incredible," said a voice beside her. It was Amber, one of the educators on the team. "The way you responded to that mother, without defensiveness, with firmness and empathy. It was a lesson in communication." Emily smiled, touched by the sincere compliment. "Thank you. I confess that for a moment my heart stopped. It's natural, but know that you've earned the respect of all of us. We're eager to start working under your leadership." Those words brought a wave of emotion that Emily struggled to contain. After so many years feeling undervalued, it was almost surreal to receive such explicit recognition. The rest of the day passed at a less intense pace. The families were saying goodbye, some already leaving school supplies and uniforms they had brought, others scheduling individual visits for the following week. At the end of the afternoon, only the team remained, organizing the space and discussing the final adjustments before the official inauguration. "I think we deserve a celebration," announced Michael, gathering everyone in the teacher's room. "The first meeting with families is always the most challenging, and you were exceptional." A small celebration was improvised with sodas and snacks that Rebecca provided from a nearby bakery. The atmosphere was one of enthusiasm and camaraderie, that kind of connection that only forms between people united by a purpose greater than themselves. When everyone began to disperse, Michael asked Emily to stay. "I'd like to talk in private, if you have a moment." They headed to the room that would be the coordination office, a cozy space with shelves of pedagogical books, a large desk, and comfortable armchairs for consultations. "So," began Michael, sitting in one of the armchairs and indicating the other for Emily. "How do you feel after this first big test?" Emily reflected for a moment. "Honestly, exhausted, but alive. It's hard to explain. It's as if every cell in my body was vibrating at a different frequency." Michael smiled, understanding. "I know that feeling well. It's what happens when we find our purpose." There was a moment of comfortable silence between them. Emily realized that despite the hierarchical difference, a relationship of genuine mutual respect had been established. "There's something I need to tell you," Michael continued in a more serious tone. "Something that might help you better understand why I chose you for this position." Emily adjusted herself in the armchair, suddenly apprehensive. "Do you remember that I mentioned that Sarah, my wife, was a teacher?" Emily nodded. "What I didn't tell is that she worked for years in the public system, just like you. In fact, in 2017, she coordinated a pilot inclusion project that involved several schools in the network." "The Wings Project," murmured Emily, immediately remembering. "It was revolutionary. It established protocols for reception and curricular adaptation that are still a reference." Michael nodded, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and sadness. "Exactly. Sarah dedicated 2 years of her life to that project. She visited schools, trained teachers, fought against bureaucracy and neglect. And in each report she brought home, in each story she shared during dinner, there was mention of an extraordinary young teacher from a school in Highland." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. "Are you saying that—" "Sarah knew your work, Emily. She deeply admired what you did with minimal resources. She even mentioned that she would like to invite you to join the New Pathways team, which at that time was just beginning. But then came Lily's diagnosis, followed by her own illness, and many plans were left by the wayside." Emily felt tears forming, but she didn't try to contain them. The revelation was too powerful. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Michael sighed. "I wanted you to accept the position on your own merits, not because of an emotional connection to Sarah's story. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I could talk about this without falling apart. Emily understood the unspoken. The pain of loss was still present, even after years. When I saw you at the airport, continued Michael, I didn't recognize you immediately. It was only later, when researching your name, that I realized the extraordinary coincidence. The teacher that Sarah so admired was the same person who, years later, had given up her seat on the plane so that Lily could arrive in time in Chicago. I don't believe in coincidences, murmured Emily. Neither do I, agreed Michael. I prefer to think that there are forces in the universe that guide us to where we need to be, to the people we need to meet. A silence loaded with emotion established itself between them. Emily felt simultaneously crushed and elevated by the revelation. There was something deeply significant in knowing that her work had been noticed and valued long before the incident at the airport, long before meeting Michael personally. On the day of the inauguration, Michael finally said, I would like to reveal this connection publicly, to tell how Sarah somehow brought us closer even before we knew each other. Would you mind? Emily shook her head. Not at all. It would be a beautiful tribute. Michael smiled, visibly relieved. Thank you. And know that although the past has connected us, it is your present and future that make me certain that you are the right person to lead this unit. When they finally said goodbye, it was already night in Denver. Emily walked slowly to her new apartment, observing the city lights that were lighting up like earthly stars. She felt transformed by that afternoon's revelation, as if an invisible circle had closed, as if a greater meaning revealed itself behind the apparent casualties of life. That night, Emily wrote a long letter that would never be sent. A letter to Sarah, thanking her for having noticed her work when no one else did, for having planted a seed that, years later, would germinate in unexpected ways. A letter to say that her legacy continued to live, not only in the institute that carried her vision forward, but in the life of each child who would find there a space of welcome and growth. As the words flowed, Emily felt a deep certainty establish itself in her heart. She was exactly where she should be, and the journey, although challenging, would be worth every step. The morning of the inauguration of the new Pathways unit dawned with an impeccably blue sky over Denver. Emily woke up before the alarm clock, a mixture of anxiety and excitement making her heart beat faster than normal. She sat on the edge of the bed for a few moments, breathing deeply, trying to absorb the magnitude of the moment she was about to experience. On her bedside table, the small stone that Lily had given her in the park shone softly under the morning light that entered through the cracks in the curtain. Emily picked it up, feeling its comforting weight in the palm of her hand. It was a tangible reminder of how small gestures could trigger profound transformations. After a long shower, she put on the outfit she had carefully chosen for the occasion, an emerald green dress, elegant but comfortable, complemented by a pair of delicate earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. She wanted to feel connected to her roots on this day of new beginnings. Her cell phone rang when she was finishing breakfast. It was Jessica. Nervous? Asked her friend without preamble. A little, admitted Emily. Or maybe a lot. Normal. Big days always bring big butterflies in the stomach. But I know you're going to rock it. I'll be there to give you a standing ovation. Emily smiled, grateful for the unconditional support of the friend who had been her safe harbor in the most difficult moments. That means a lot to me, Jess. Hey, we're practically sisters. I wouldn't miss this for anything. There was a pause before Jessica added, I'm proud of you, you know, of how you transformed a difficult situation into something so extraordinary. The words touched Emily deeply. Thank you. See you soon. Upon arriving at the institute, an hour before the scheduled time for the ceremony, Emily found the team already in full activity. Rebecca was coordinating the final adjustments to the garden decoration, where white chairs had been arranged in concentric semicircles in front of a small stage. Amber and the other educators were organizing the portfolios and materials that would be presented to the families after the official ceremony. Good morning, Emily, greeted Rebecca with her usual enthusiasm. Everything is practically ready. Michael called to say he'll arrive with Lily in half an hour. Emily nodded, making a conscious effort to maintain external calm, despite the storm of emotions that stirred inside her. She circulated through the space, checking every detail, briefly talking with each team member, offering words of encouragement and gratitude for everyone's commitment. The garden was especially beautiful that morning. Colorful flowers framed the path that led to the main building, and ribbons in the Institute's colors, blue and green, hung gracefully from the trees. In the center of the stage, a large panel displayed the New Pathways logo and the motto that summarized its philosophy. Each child, a unique universe to be discovered. Emily stopped in front of this panel, allowing herself a moment of reflection. A few months ago, she was hopeless in her small apartment, sending resumes that no one responded to, questioning her life choices. Now, she was about to lead an educational project that embodied everything she had always believed in. Amazing how life takes turns, isn't it? Michael's voice startled her. He had arrived silently and was now beside her, observing the panel with a serene expression. "Sometimes, for the better," replied Emily with a smile. "Where's Lily?" "With Amber, getting to know her new classroom. She's so excited she barely slept last night." Lily would be one of the first students at the new unit, a decision that Michael had made after consulting several specialists. The proximity to her father and the familiar environment, they argued, would be beneficial for her development. "Ready for the big moment?" asked Michael, turning his attention to Emily. She hesitated for just an instant before answering, "Yes, nervous but ready." Michael nodded, understanding. "Nervousness is healthy. It means you care." They stood side by side in silence for a few moments, each immersed in their own thoughts. There was something curious about the relationship they had developed in recent months, a mutual respect that went beyond professional hierarchy, a tacit understanding that dispensed with explanations. "I brought something for you," said Michael finally, extending a small package that he took from his jacket pocket. Emily accepted it, intrigued. Inside the velvet-lined box, she found a delicate brooch in the shape of a tree, with small green stones representing its leaves. "It was Sarah's," explained Michael, his voice softening as he mentioned his wife. "She wore it at all inaugurations, at all special moments related to the Institute. I thought, well, that she would like you to wear it today." Emily felt emotion tighten her throat. The gesture was deeply significant, a symbolic passing of the baton, a recognition that transcended words. "Michael, I don't know if I can accept something so personal." "Please," he insisted gently. "It would be an honor for me. And for Lily, too." She helped choose the box. With slightly trembling hands, Emily pinned the brooch to the lapel of her dress. The small weight on her chest seemed to carry a sacred responsibility, the continuity of a legacy of love and dedication. "Thank you," she murmured. "I promise to honor everything it represents." Guests began to arrive punctually at 10 a.m. Besides the families of the enrolled children, there were representatives from the Department of Education, journalists from local media, directors of other educational institutions in the city, and even the mayor, who would make a brief appearance to highlight the importance of private initiatives in strengthening inclusive education. Emily observed the garden gradually filling up, recognizing faces from the previous meeting, noting the presence of Catherine Mitchell, the questioning mother, now with a more open and receptive expression. Jessica arrived accompanied by Mrs. Wilson, the neighbor who had so supported Emily in difficult times. Both waved animatedly, silently transmitting strength and confidence. At precisely 10:30, the ceremony began. Michael went up on stage first, received with warm applause. His speech was brief and moving. He talked about the trajectory of New Pathways, about the challenges overcome, about the vision of a truly inclusive society. "Today," he concluded, "we take another step in this journey, and I have the pleasure and honor to introduce the person who will lead this new chapter of our story, someone whose dedication to inclusive education transcends titles and theories, someone whose empathy and courage have already transformed lives without her even knowing. Please warmly welcome our pedagogical coordinator, Emily Parker." Emily's heart seemed to want to jump out of her chest as she climbed the few steps that led to the stage. The applause was deafening, but she barely heard it. All her attention was focused on maintaining composure, on finding the voice that seemed to have momentarily fled. When she positioned herself in front of the microphone, her eyes scanned the audience. She saw expectant faces, encouraging smiles, some expressions of curiosity. In the front row, Lily, with a flowery dress and a blue bow in her hair, waved enthusiastically. Beside her, Jessica and Mrs. Wilson seemed about to burst with pride. Good morning, everyone, Emily began, her voice surprisingly firm. It is with a heart overflowing with gratitude and hope that I welcome you today to this space that, I am sure, will be the stage for many stories of overcoming and growth. She paused, letting her gaze connect with the families present. Many of you already know me from the previous meeting. You know a bit about my professional trajectory, about my pedagogical beliefs. But today I would like to share something more personal, the story of how I got here. With simple but deeply sincere words, Emily narrated the episode at the airport. She talked about the closed public school, about the unanswered resumes, about the interview in Chicago that represented her last hope. She described the moment she saw Lily in her father's arms, the instantaneous decision to give up her seat, the return home with a heavy heart but, somehow, at peace. What I didn't know at that moment, she continued, was that gesture which seemed to close one possibility was actually opening a door to something much greater. Emily then told about the subsequent encounter with Michael and Lily in the park, about the invitation to visit the Institute, about the discovery of the unexpected connection with Sarah through the Wings project. Sarah Thompson, whom I never had the privilege of meeting personally, had noticed my work years before. She had valued my efforts when I myself doubted their impact. And today, in some mysterious and beautiful way, her legacy connects to my path. Emily gently touched the tree-shaped brooch. This symbol I carry today belonged to her. It represents not only the continuity of her vision, but a commitment I make before all of you. The commitment to nurture each child who enters through these doors with the same care, the same dedication, and the same love that she would invest. The audience was in absolute silence, many eyes teary, many hearts touched by the sincerity of those words. Emily saw Michael discreetly wipe away a tear, while Lily, without completely understanding the depth of the moment, smiled radiantly. Our mission here at New Pathways, continued Emily, her voice gaining strength, is not simply to educate children with special needs. It is to reveal to the world the extraordinary richness that exists in diversity. It is to transform what many see as limitations into unexplored possibilities. It is to build a future where no one is left behind for being different. Emily paused, allowing her words to echo. Many of you, fathers and mothers, have already heard pessimistic voices tell you what your children will not be able to do. Here, we will focus on what they can, on what they are, on the unique potential that each one carries. And I invite you to be our partners in this journey, because I deeply believe that it is in the union between family and school that true transformation is born. When she concluded her speech, a reverent silence hung over the garden for a few seconds before it exploded into warm applause. Emily saw some families hugging each other, saw educators exchanging emotional looks, saw even the mayor, normally an impassive figure, applaud with genuine enthusiasm. But it was Lily's gesture that touched her the most. The girl got up from her seat and, with determined steps despite her unstable gait, went up on stage. In her hands, she carried a single flower, a vibrant sunflower, which she extended to Emily with a luminous smile. "For you, Miss Emily," she said in her sweet voice. "Daddy said sunflowers symbolize happiness and new beginnings." Emily accepted the flower, crouching down to be at the child's height. "Thank you, Lily. It's the most beautiful gift I could receive today." Without hesitation, Lily threw her little arms around Emily's neck, hugging her with all the strength her small body allowed. At that moment, in front of hundreds of people, they were not coordinator and student, not adult and child. They were simply two souls connected by a shared journey. Michael joined them on stage, and the three remained together, while photographers recorded the moment for local newspapers. But for Emily, that image represented much more than an inauguration photo. It was the portrait of a circle that was closing, of a destiny that was fulfilling itself through unexpected paths. The ceremony continued with the traditional ribbon cutting, followed by a guided tour of the facilities for the guests. Emily circulated among the groups, answering questions, introducing the team, explaining the methodology. She felt simultaneously exhausted and energized, as if each cell of her body vibrated at a frequency of purpose and fulfillment. At one point, she found herself face to face with Catherine Mitchell, the mother who had questioned her so harshly at the previous meeting. "Ms. Parker," began Catherine with a different expression from before, more open, more vulnerable, "I would like to apologize for the tone of our first interaction. Your story, your trajectory, made me realize that hasty judgments rarely capture the essence of a person." Emily smiled, genuinely touched. "There is no need for apologies. Your questions were legitimate, coming from a mother who only wants the best for her son." "Nathan is eager to start," confessed Catherine, referring to her son. "For the first time in years, he is enthusiastic about the idea of going to school. That, in itself, is already a small miracle." "It will be an honor to receive him," replied Emily, "and know that I will be personally attentive to his progress." When the last guest said goodbye, it was already past 3 in the afternoon. The team gathered for a discreet toast in the teacher's room, grape juice in plastic cups, but the spirit was one of genuine celebration. "To all of us," said Michael, raising his cup, "for a new beginning full of possibilities." Emily observed the faces around her, people who a few months ago were strangers and now formed a kind of professional family united by a common purpose. She felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost took her breath away. Later, when the sun was beginning to set over Denver, Emily remained alone in the Institute's garden. She sat on one of the benches, Lily's sunflower resting on her lap, Sarah's brooch silently shining on her chest. She thought about how life could change in an instant, about how a decision made in the heat of the moment, out of pure empathy, could trigger a cascade of events that transformed not only her own destiny, but touched so many other lives. She remembered her old classroom in the public school, the children she had taught there, the dreams she had nurtured even when everything seemed impossible. None of that had been in vain. Each experience, each disappointment, each small victory had been a necessary step to bring her here. The sound of footsteps on the gravel pulled her from her thoughts. Michael was approaching, with Lily asleep in his arms. "Sorry to interrupt your reflection," he said softly, "but this young lady insisted on saying goodbye before we went home." Emily smiled, noticing that Lily was deeply asleep, exhausted after the emotions of the day. "It seems sleep was stronger than willpower." Michael laughed softly. "It happens. She spent all her energy today wanting to show the school to absolutely all the guests." He hesitated for a moment before adding, "But I also wanted to say goodbye. And thank you for today, for everything, actually." "I am the one who should thank you," replied Emily, standing up, "for trusting me, for this opportunity that even in my most optimistic dreams I couldn't imagine." They stood side by side for a moment, observing the sky that was beginning to tinge with orange tones. "You know," Michael finally said, "Sarah used to say that life is a web of invisible connections, that our gestures, even apparently insignificant ones, create waves that affect lives we don't even know we touch." Emily nodded, deeply understanding that truth. "I believe that too, that nothing is by chance." "Tomorrow we really begin," commented Michael, adjusting Lily in his arms. "With the children arriving, routines being established, real challenges emerging." "I can't wait," replied Emily with sincerity. The anxiety she had felt in the morning had transformed into a serene expectation, a quiet confidence in the path that opened before her. When Michael and Lily left, Emily remained for a few more minutes in the silent garden. The gentle afternoon breeze swayed the leaves of the trees, creating an almost musical whisper. She closed her eyes, absorbing the moment, engraving it in her memory as a landmark, the day when her future truly began. As she walked home in the twilight of that July afternoon, Emily Parker was no longer the same hopeless woman who months before had waited for a flight at Denver International Airport. She was a transformed woman, not just by favorable external circumstances, but by having rediscovered in herself the courage to believe, to risk, to grow. The Denver sky, now painted in shades of pink and gold, seemed to reflect the promise of bright days. And Emily, with Lily's sunflower in one hand and the key to her new home in the other, walked with light steps and a full heart, not because everything was perfect, but because finally everything made sense. Dear listeners, we hope that Emily and Lily's story has touched your hearts. This is just one example of how small acts of kindness can transform lives in ways we could never imagine. For more moving narratives like this, be sure to visit our channel, where we daily share stories that celebrate the best of the human soul. If this journey of new beginnings and hope resonated with you, leave your like and share with someone who needs to hear that new paths are always possible. Subscribe so you don't miss our next stories, and tell us in the comments, What seemingly small gesture transformed your life? Your story deserves to be told too.